Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. No matter how hard a film tries to follow the book, something is always lost. Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix is a perfect example. I still remember holding that 800-page brick in my hands. And then the movie came out, the shortest in the entire franchise. The longest book, the shortest movie. Ironic, isn't it? To be fair, the film aimed to keep a fast pace. Some scenes were cut for the sake of rhythm, so the story wouldn't drag. But for true fans of the wizarding world, it's important to know what was left out. And sometimes it wasn't just tiny details, it was dramatic turns that deepened the conflict, revealed characters, and made Hogwarts feel even more alive. So let's take a closer look at what the Order of the Phoenix movie either omitted entirely or drastically changed. Enjoy the video. Number 1, St. Mungo's Hospital and the Longbottom's tragedy. After Arthur Weasley is attacked, he's taken to St. Mungo's Hospital. In the book, Harry and his friends go to visit him, and there they witness a heartbreaking scene. Neville visiting his parents. They were left permanently hospitalized after being tortured by Death Eaters, including the Lestranges and Barty Crouch Jr. This moment says a lot about Neville, why he is the way he is, and where his inner strength comes from. Also, it's in St. Mungo's that we run into Gilderoy Lockhart again, still suffering from the memory charm that backfired. In the movie, not a word. And this could have been one of the most powerful scenes. Number 2, no Quidditch, no Ron and Ginny's arcs. The film's always treated Quidditch a bit carelessly, sometimes thrown in for visual flair, sometimes cut altogether. In Order of the Phoenix, it's completely gone, which means we never saw Harry, Fred, and George getting banned from the team for fighting Malfoy, Umbridge confiscating their brooms, Ginny becoming Seeker and winning the final match by catching the snitch, Ron struggling as a keeper, being heckled with chants like, "Weasley is our king," until he wins the last game. This was huge for Ginny and Ron's development. Without Quidditch, the film loses another vibrant layer of Hogwarts life. Number 3, Ron and Hermione become prefects, but not Harry. In the book, Ron and Hermione are made prefects. Harry naturally feels hurt. He's been through everything and more. One scene especially stands out. Mrs. Weasley throws Ron a celebratory dinner, treating it like a royal honor. It's a crucial moment, showing Harry's isolation. He feels forgotten, unappreciated, a feeling that feeds his frustration with Dumbledore, who's already been avoiding him. But in the film, this is cut. One more layer of emotional tension, gone. Number 4, Percy Weasley's plotline, missing. Percy Weasley shows up in the earlier films, Hogwarts, and vanishes. In the book, he plays a key role. After the Weasleys side with Harry, Percy turns against them and joins the Ministry. Molly is heartbroken, the brothers are furious, and Percy becomes a symbol of betrayal. His appearance during Dumbledore's arrest could have carried massive emotional weight if the audience had any idea who he was. Instead, he's just a random man in a Ministry suit. Number 5, Dobby and the Secret of the Room of Requirement. In the movie, Neville stumbles upon the Room of Requirement. Makes sense, sure. But in the book, it's Dobby who tells Harry about the secret room, the same place where he used to hide Winky when she was, let's say, overly fond of butterbeer. Dobby is completely removed from Order of the Phoenix, but he's more than just fan service. He's a crucial part of the lore. Number 6, the betrayal inside Dumbledore's army. Dumbledore's army trained in the Room of Requirement until someone betrayed them. In the book, it's Marietta Edgecombe, Cho Chang's friend. Hermione had hexed the parchment they signed. Sneak appears in boils on Marietta's face. In the movie, this character doesn't exist. Instead, Cho is made the betrayer, under the influence of Veritaserum. Harry coldly rejects her afterward, showing no sympathy. It's an awkward moment, especially since in the book, Cho was innocent. Number 7, Hagrid's mission and Madame Maxime forgotten. Hagrid is gone for most of the book because he's off recruiting giants. He comes back bruised and battered. The book makes it clear that he wasn't alone. Madame Maxime went with him. They both risked their lives trying to convince the giants not to side with Voldemort. In the movie, not a single mention of her, and yet it's these little details that make the world feel real.
Number 8. Forgotten friendship with the Centaurs. Hagrid came back from his mission battered and bruised, but not just from giants. He had tried to reason with the Centaurs, to build a fragile trust. They're proud, he told Harry, don't like being bossed around. But under Umbridge's regime, the Forbidden Forest became more than dangerous. It became political. The Centaurs felt hunted, insulted, used. When Hagrid tried to defend them, the Ministry punished him. When he fought back, they sent 5 wizards to drag him off school grounds. The Centaurs watched from the shadows and turned their backs. So when Dolores Umbridge marched into the forest demanding obedience, their anger exploded. They didn't just attack her, they judged her. This is a human problem, said McGonagall. In the film, they appear like angry beasts, faceless and sudden. But the book gave them history, pain, betrayal. The kidnapping of Umbridge wasn't just revenge. It was the breaking point of years of rising tension. The movie skipped all of it, and with that, it erased one of the most powerful lessons, that even magical creatures have limits and reasons. Number 9. The screaming portrait of Mrs. Black. Every time someone opened the door at number 12, Grimmauld Place, she screamed. The portrait of Walburga Black, Sirius's mother, came to life in fury. "Filth! Scum! Blood traitors!" she shrieked, her voice echoing through the halls. Covered in dust, framed in velvet, she wasn't just a magical painting. She was a prison, a reminder.
Sirius hated that portrait more than anything. He tried to tear it down, but it wouldn't budge. "She'll never leave," he muttered. "Not until this house is nothing but ash." Her voice haunted him, just like the family he never escaped. The film left her out. No curtain, no screaming, no curse-filled tirades. Without her, Grimmauld Place felt like a house, not a tomb. Viewers missed the tension, the suffocation, the reason Sirius kept pacing like a caged animal. That portrait was more than noise. It was Sirius's past clawing at the walls. His hatred for everything she stood for wasn't comic relief. It was pain, and the silence of the movie robbed us of the ghosts that never stopped screaming. Number 10. Dumbledore and Harry's conversation after the battle. The battle at the Ministry had ended. Sirius was gone. The prophecy was shattered, but Harry wasn't finished. He wanted answers. In the book, Dumbledore finally gives them. Not behind a desk, not with riddles, but with truth. "I cared about you too much," he says. "I have watched you struggling under more burdens than any student who has ever passed through this school." Dumbledore admits he avoided Harry all year, not out of anger but fear. Fear of hurting him, fear of what the prophecy meant, that neither can live while the other survives. Harry doesn't take it well. He shouts, smashes Dumbledore's instruments. He weeps, and Dumbledore lets him. He doesn't stop him or scold him. He stands in silence, eyes full of pain. That conversation is the rawest moment between them. It's not about magic. It's about grief, love, responsibility. For the first time, Harry sees that even Dumbledore can make mistakes. Even Dumbledore can be afraid. In the end, Dumbledore says, we must choose between what is right and what is easy. In the film, that scene barely exists. A sentence or two, a flicker of tension, no shouts, no tears, no confession. The emotional storm that defines the final chapters of the book is reduced to a quiet summary, and with it, the depth of their relationship disappears. Without that talk, Dumbledore becomes a mentor again, but not a man. And Harry walks away with a prophecy, but without the truth. Number 11. Snape's worst memory lacks context. Harry didn't mean to see it. 1 second he was digging through Snape's mind during occlumency lessons, then he was falling backward into someone else's memory. The scene was sunlit. A teenage boy dangled upside down in mid-air, his robes over his head. "Who wants to see me take off Snively's pants?" James Potter laughed, wand in hand. Sirius Black grinned. A crowd watched. No one helped. Harry stared, frozen. This wasn't a prank. It was cruelty. "Leave him alone!" young Lily Evans shouted, but it was too late. The damage was done. Snape's worst memory wasn't just about being embarrassed. It was about betrayal, humiliation, powerlessness. Harry watched his father, his hero, mock a boy who did nothing but exist. Worse still, Harry saw the look on Snape's face after he screamed at Lily, calling her a mudblood, a slur. She recoiled. The friendship shattered. In just a few pages, Rowling flipped everything. Snape wasn't just bitter, he was broken, and James wasn't just a martyr, he had been a bully. In the film, the scene is there, but stripped. James appears for seconds. Snape is bullied, yes, but it's quick and distant. No dialogue, no Lily, no insults, no fallout. The weight is gone, the shame, the years of resentment, all reduced to a visual flash. The audience never feels Harry's shock, his confusion, his guilt. The turning point in his understanding of both his father and his professor fades into the background. But in the book, everything changes. Harry walks out of that pensive with a new scar, one no spell can heal. He no longer sees Snape as just a cold, bitter man. He sees a boy who was hurt. And he no longer worships James blindly. "Maybe my father was a bit of an idiot," he admits. That kind of realization, about family, about truth, isn't just powerful. It's human. And the film, by skipping it, loses one of the story's most painful and beautiful lessons. Number 12. McGonagall's confrontation with Umbridge. It started like any other career meeting. Harry walked in, trying to hide how badly he needed this to go right. He wanted to be an aura. He had no backup plan. Professor McGonagall sat behind the desk, straight-backed and stern as always. But when Dolores Umbridge entered the room and took a seat beside her, the air froze. Harry barely got 3 words out before Umbridge began interrupting. "The Ministry has no plans to hire delinquents," she said with a sugar-coated smile. McGonagall's nostrils flared. "Potter has every chance of becoming an aura," she snapped. "He has talent, dedication." But Umbridge kept talking. McGonagall didn't back down. In fact, she leaned forward. Her voice was cold steel. "If it is the last thing I do," she said, "I will make sure you become an aura, Potter." That line echoed, not just because of what she said, but because of how she said it. It wasn't about grades or qualifications anymore. It was about justice. She stared Umbridge down like a general facing a tyrant, and Umbridge, for once, had no smile left. That was the real power of Minerva McGonagall, unshaken, unbending. The film trims the scene. The dialogue is flat. McGonagall is firm, but she isn't furious. Umbridge is annoying, but not dangerous. And Harry, he's barely more than an observer. The sharp tension, the stakes, the clash of ideals, none of it survives the adaptation, a powerful confrontation about freedom, ambition, and the soul of Hogwarts is reduced to a quiet disagreement. McGonagall's fire is watered down. In the book, that meeting defines her. It's the moment she draws a line in the sand. She tells Umbridge and the Ministry, "This boy matters, his dreams matter, and I will not let you take them." That's not just teaching, that's loyalty, that's courage, that's McGonagall. The film forgot that moment. Readers never did. Number 13, the stress and importance of the OWL exams. The OWL exams were more than just tests, they were war on parchment. Hogwarts in the 5th year wasn't just under Umbridge's rule, it was under siege. The pressure of these magical exams crushed even the best students. Hermione Granger, usually calm, started whispering answers in her sleep. Ron forgot his own name during the charm's practical, and Harry collapsed. Right there, during the History of Magic exam, he fell out of his chair, eyes wide open, gripped by a vision. Sirius is being tortured, he gasped when he woke. The proctors had no idea what was happening, but the readers knew Voldemort had found a way inside his mind. The exams weren't just academic hurdles. They were the setting for chaos. During the astronomy OWL, the students were taking notes on the night sky when ministry officials stormed the grounds. From their towers, they watched in horror as Professor McGonagall rushed outside to help Hagrid. 4 stunners hit her square in the chest. She fell hard. 4 stunning spells straight to the chest at her age, Madame Pomfrey said later. Cowards! In front of every 5th year, the school's strongest moral compass was dropped like a criminal, and no one did a thing. The film barely touches these moments. It shows a test here, a clipboard there, but the atmosphere is gone. There's no pounding heart, no sweaty palms, no dread, as Umbridge marches past with a clipboard and a forced smile. The students of Hogwarts weren't just studying, they were surviving. Every hallway echoed with fear. Every classroom felt like a trap. These weren't just schoolchildren anymore. They were soldiers in uniforms, and yet they kept going. Hermione kept reading, Ron kept laughing, even badly. And Harry, with the weight of visions and death pressing on him, kept fighting. The exams in the book weren't about grades. They were about holding on to who you were, while everything around you burned. The movie missed this fire, but in the book, it blazed. Number 14, Sirius Black's Inheritance and the House on Grimmauld Place. After Sirius Black's death, the book doesn't give the characters time to grieve. Instead, it throws them straight into uncertainty. The question isn't just emotional, it's legal and magical. Who now owns 12 Grimmauld Place? Sirius never wrote a will. The Black family house, filled with dark artifacts and old magic, should have passed to the next of kin. But Harry Potter wasn't a blood relative. The Ministry of Magic hesitated. Could the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix now belong to someone else, perhaps even fall into enemy hands? J.K. Rowling doesn't leave it to chance. The answer comes not through a courtroom, but through Kreacher. The old, bitter house elf was once fiercely loyal to the Black family. When Sirius died, the question was whether Kreacher would accept Harry as his new master. If not, it would prove Harry had no rightful claim, but when Harry commands Kreacher, the elf obeys. Kreacher will do whatever Master Harry wants, he growls, and that single act of submission seals the inheritance. Grimmauld Place is now Harry's. The film never shows this. It skips the legal and magical drama completely. Viewers are left to assume the house just stays with the Order, no questions asked. But in the book, this moment is a turning point. It confirms that Harry has not only inherited Sirius's home, but also the responsibility that comes with it. It marks the beginning of Harry stepping into a more adult role, guardian of secrets, keeper of a cursed legacy. More than that, the house becomes a strategic asset. The Order continues to use it as their secret base. Kreacher, once an enemy within, becomes a reluctant ally. Without this inheritance, Harry would never have had access to the house again in Deathly Hallows. The films robbed this moment of its weight. They forgot that sometimes a house is more than bricks. It's a key to the war. Number 15, Umbridge is much more terrifying in the book. In the shadowed corridors of Hogwarts during Harry's 5th year, a far more sinister power took root than the film adaptation dared to explore. Dolores Umbridge, under the Ministry's deceptive pink facade, established a reign of terror that the movie merely hinted at, but which the book laid bare in disturbing clarity. While the film presents her as a bureaucratic nuisance, draped in lace and feline plates, the novel reveals a character who embodies cruelty masked by false civility, a woman whose thirst for control and disdain for difference verges on the fanatical. She is not simply strict, she is brutal. She does not merely punish, she breaks spirits. Umbridge's arrival at Hogwarts is marked by her first lesson in defense against the dark arts. She forbids the students from practicing magic, a restriction that feels stifling even on screen. Yet in the book, this restriction is not merely a classroom policy. It's part of a systemic dismantling of resistance. Her refusal to teach practical defense skills reveals not only her loyalty to the Ministry's propaganda, which denies the return of Voldemort, but her deeper intention to disempower the students. Harry's confrontation with her, where he insists Voldemort has returned, is not just a rebellious moment. In the book, it sets into motion a series of punishments that define Umbridge's true nature. After questioning her authority, Harry is subjected to one of the darkest forms of torture ever described in the series. She hands Harry a black quill and a blank piece of parchment and instructs him to write, "I must not tell lies. There is no ink." As Harry writes, he realizes the quill is magical. It carves the words into the back of his hand, slicing his skin open, and the blood becomes the ink. The pain is described in painful detail. He let out a gasp of pain as the words were cut into his skin. Yet when he looks at Umbridge, she smiles sweetly, offering no acknowledgement of his suffering. The film glances over this, reducing it to a few seconds of screen time, but the book returns to this act repeatedly, showing Harry forced to endure the punishment over several nights. There is a psychological war being waged. She is not trying to teach Harry obedience, she is trying to erase his will, and he is not the only victim. Umbridge encourages an atmosphere of fear and suspicion, which she fosters through her inquisitorial squad, an army of student informants handpicked from the Slytherin house. Draco Malfoy, Vincent Crabbe, Gregory Goyle, and others are given unprecedented authority to dock points, punish students, and enforce Umbridge's increasingly tyrannical rules. The squad's creation turns Hogwarts into a surveillance state. Trust is fractured, friends whisper in corners, teachers are monitored. This betrayal of student autonomy and camaraderie is barely mentioned in the film, which simplifies the conflict into isolated confrontations. In the book, the omnipresence of Umbridge's power changes the texture of Hogwarts entirely. Even Hogwarts teachers are not safe from her authoritarian reach. Professor Trelawney is publicly humiliated during a dismissal ceremony in the courtyard. The film includes this moment, but in the book, the cruelty is palpable. Trelawney wails, her personal belongings scattered across the stone steps, as Umbridge coldly informs her she is no longer needed. When Professor McGonagall attempts to intervene, she is rebuffed. Only the intervention of Professor Dumbledore prevents Trelawney's complete expulsion from the grounds. Umbridge's power is unchecked, sanctioned by the Ministry, and emboldened by her belief in magical superiority. It is a terrifying glimpse of what Hogwarts becomes when compassion is replaced by policy. One of the most horrifying omissions from the film is Umbridge's open disdain for non-human beings. Her treatment of Hagrid is dripping with prejudice. In the novel, she visits his hut under cover of darkness, accompanied by Ministry thugs, and attempts to remove him from Hogwarts forcibly. Hagrid is half-giant, a fact she loathes. She views him not as a man, but as a dangerous creature. When the attempt to capture him fails, the Ministry agents attack him with stunning spells in front of students. Professor McGonagall rushes to intervene and is struck down by 4 spells simultaneously. 4 stunning spells hit her in the chest at once. She collapsed onto the ground, her wand falling from her hand. The scene is brutal. McGonagall is taken to St. Mungo's. The students are traumatized, and Umbridge shows no remorse. In the film, this act of violence is completely omitted, robbing viewers of the true extent of her malevolence. And then there are the Centaurs. In the Forbidden Forest, Umbridge's racism reaches its peak. She refers to the Centaurs as filthy half-breeds, shouting derogatory comments as they surround her. The book makes clear that Umbridge believes herself inherently superior, not just to Centaurs, but to any creature not purely human. This arrogance costs her. She is dragged screaming into the trees by the Centaurs. The film treats this moment as near comical, but the novel does not flinch. Her terror is real. Her hatred has brought her face to face with the consequences of her beliefs, and even after her return she refuses to speak of it. Traumatized by her experience. The psychological toll Umbridge inflicts on the student body is enormous. Hermione, always composed, grows desperate. Ron, usually light-hearted, becomes guarded. Neville, whose growth we witness throughout the book, begins to understand what true defiance costs. Their creation of Dumbledore's army is not just about learning defense, it is about reclaiming their agency. In Room of Requirement, they forge a sanctuary of resistance. This underground rebellion is born from necessity. Umbridge has stripped them of every other means of empowerment. In the book, this is clear. She is not simply an obstacle. She is the enemy. Number 16, James Potter's Animagus Past and Marauder Backstory. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, there is a scene that lingers in the minds of readers long after the chapter ends, a memory that shatters illusions and forces Harry to confront the truth about the man he has always idealized. It is in this moment, buried in the swirling depths of Professor Snape's pensive, that Harry witnesses his father, James Potter, humiliating a teenage Severus Snape in front of a crowd of laughing students. The moment is painful not just because of what James does, but because of what the film adaptation chooses to ignore. The movie brushes past the legacy of the Marauders, the hidden depths of James Potter's identity as an unregistered animagus, and the intricate web of mischief, cruelty, and loyalty that defined his youth. By omitting these details, the film strips away a layer of complexity that the book so carefully builds. James Potter's secret as an animagus is not a passing detail. It is a cornerstone of his identity and a symbol of the bond he shared with Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. Becoming an animagus is a rare magical feat, requiring years of study, discipline, and risk. James, along with his friends, accomplished this transformation in their 5th year, turning into a stag to accompany Remus during his painful, full moon transformations. This act of friendship is monumental. It is selfless, dangerous, and deeply loyal. It reveals a side of James that is noble and brave, driven by love for his friend rather than the desire for power. Yet in the memory Harry sees, this side of James is nowhere to be found. Instead, he is a cocky, arrogant boy who flicks his wand with casual cruelty, using magic to humiliate someone weaker than himself. The pensive scene in the book is brutal in its honesty. It shows James lounging beneath a tree, ruffling his hair to look windswept, laughing with Sirius as they taunt Severus. Snape, who is described as being very thin but his nose was large and his hair was greasy, tries to retaliate but is overpowered. The moment is described in a way that makes it uncomfortably vivid. James dangles Snape upside down in midair, exposing his underpants to the crowd. The laughter of students echoes around the memory, and Lily Evans, the future mother of Harry Potter, arrives not in admiration, but in disgust. She berates James for his bullying, but he shrugs it off, grinning. "I'm bored," he says, with no remorse in his voice. This is not the image of a hero. This is a 17-year-old boy drunk on popularity and power. And yet, even in this cruelty, there lies a deeper narrative. What the book does and what the film fails to do is connect this memory to the Marauders' legacy. The Marauders were more than just school friends. They were animagi, pranksters, guardians of secrets. They created the Marauders map, a piece of magic so advanced and clever that even years later it remains unmatched in Hogwarts lore. The map itself is signed by Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, Remus, Peter, Sirius, and James, each name a nod to their animagus forms. James was Prongs, the stag, a form he would one day pass on to his son. It is this form that Harry subconsciously summons in Prisoner of Azkaban during the Dementor attack. "Expecto Patronum," he cries, and out gallops a shining stag. He sees it and believes it is his father. The Patronus is a reflection of James's animagus form, an inheritance of love, strength, and magic. The tragedy is that this significant layer is entirely absent from the film version of Order of the Phoenix. The memory Harry sees is cut short, shown without context, and devoid of emotional weight. The Marauders are never mentioned by name. There is no whisper of animagi, no explanation of the map's origins, no connection drawn between James's stag form and Harry's own Patronus. The result is a lost opportunity. The audience sees James the bully, but not James the loyal friend, the daring rule-breaker who risked everything to stand beside a werewolf. The omission flattens the character, simplifying a boy whose life was rich with contradictions. Snape's hatred for James is not born merely from this one humiliation. It is years of conflict, clashing ideologies, and jealousy over Lily Evans. But this particular memory hits Harry hard because it shows him something he wasn't prepared for. The boy in the memory is not the valiant Gryffindor his teachers spoke of. He is not the noble man Dumbledore revered. He is human, flawed, and painfully similar to the kinds of bullies Harry himself has encountered at Hogwarts. Dudley Dursley comes to mind, loud, entitled, and unrepentant. For Harry, who has always clung to the idea that he comes from something better, this realization is devastating. When Lupin speaks of the Marauders in the book, it is with a mixture of fondness and regret. He acknowledges their mischief and brilliance, but he doesn't deny their arrogance. "They were the best friends I ever had," he tells Harry. "They did enough damage to Snape in school that he never got over it." This single line carries more weight than the film's entire depiction of their shared past. It paints James not as a saint, but as a boy growing into a man, capable of cruelty, yet also of extraordinary kindness. His decision to become an animagus was an act of pure friendship. It was done in secret, without any expectation of reward. That duality makes James real, and it makes his legacy worth examining. Even Sirius Black, who often romanticizes their youth, has moments of clarity. When Harry confronts him about the memory, Sirius is quick to defend James. "He grew out of it," Sirius says, almost desperately. "He was only 15. But Harry isn't comforted. He realizes that Sirius, too, is trapped in the past, clinging to a version of James that may have never fully existed. The book uses this tension to explore the theme of maturity, how people change, how they are remembered, and how the past can haunt the present. The film, in its brevity, bypasses all of this. Number 17, Neville's relationship with his grandmother. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, a powerful and painfully human story unfolds in the quiet background, mostly unseen by those watching only the film. Neville Longbottom, once the clumsy boy with a toad, begins to emerge as something deeper, more complex, and more heartbreaking. In the book, Neville's transformation isn't just about bravery in battle or moments of magic. It's rooted in a life defined by expectations, disappointment, and a relationship with a grandmother who, though harsh, represents a legacy of pain and pride. This story, as written by J.K. Rowling, adds a layer of emotional depth to Neville's character that the film largely ignores, and in doing so it misses a crucial element of his journey, the burden of memory and the quiet strength forged in grief. Neville's grandmother, Augusta Longbottom, is a woman hardened by tragedy. She is not portrayed as warm or nurturing. Instead, she is stern, old-fashioned, and demanding. Yet within the rigid framework of her expectations lies a deep, desperate hope that her grandson will rise above his struggles and restore the honor of a family broken by war. Her son and daughter-in-law, Frank and Alice Longbottom, were tortured into madness by Bellatrix Lestrange and her fellow Death Eaters. They were heroes of the previous war, admired and respected auras whose bravery was unquestioned. Augusta has raised Neville under the long shadow of their memory, expecting him to fill shoes he never asked to wear. When Neville is introduced in the series, he is awkward, forgetful, and constantly embarrassed by his failures. But in Order of the Phoenix, Rowling begins to peel back the surface to show readers the weight he carries. In one of the most poignant scenes in the book, Harry and his friends unexpectedly encounter Neville at St. Mungo's hospital for magical maladies and injuries. Neville is visiting his parents, who no longer recognize him. His mother, Alice, in her childlike state, gives him a gum wrapper as a gift. Neville silently takes it, eyes filled with tears, and slips it into his pocket. His grandmother watches him, and though she doesn't speak of love, there's a gravity in her silence. This moment doesn't make it into the film. In fact, the entire visit to St. Mungo's is absent. By removing it, the filmmakers erase a foundational layer of Neville's character. That small scene, with no spells or action, reveals more about him than any duel. It explains his motivation, his pain, and the emotional cost of living in a world that reveres the brave while forgetting the broken. Neville isn't just a schoolboy trying to pass exams. He's a child forced to grow up with living reminders of a horror he never witnessed but must honor. Augusta's love for Neville is not soft or sweet. It's pride forged in grief. When she scolds him, it isn't because she hates him. It's because she fears he won't live up to the standards set by his parents. It's high time your grandmother learned to be proud of the grandson she's got, rather than the one she thinks she ought to have, Professor McGonagall says in the book. And it's a rare moment of validation for Neville, whose courage often goes unseen. Augusta expects excellence not out of cruelty, but as a way to keep the memory of her son and daughter-in-law alive. She demands he become a hero because she can't bear the idea that their sacrifice was in vain. The film reduces Augusta Longbottom to a name. The emotional dynamics between her and Neville are not explored. Viewers see a brave boy who joins Dumbledore's army, but they don't understand the depth of his transformation. In the book, it becomes clear that Neville's decision to fight is not just about resisting Voldemort, it's about proving to himself, to his grandmother, and to the world that he can be more than a clumsy shadow. His bravery is not flashy, it's quiet, earned, and deeply human. The absence of Augusta's pressure and the hospital visit also strip away the context for Neville's sadness. In the book, he isn't just shy, he's hurting. Every time he stumbles in a lesson or fails to remember a spell, he's reminded of how far he is from being like Frank Longbottom. And every time he returns home for the holidays, he faces the unspoken disappointment in his grandmother's eyes. The reader is not told this directly, but it's felt in the way Neville behaves. He is desperate to belong, desperate to be worthy, and the only way he knows how is through perseverance. There is tragedy in the fact that Neville must become a warrior to be seen. Only when he joins Dumbledore's army and shows talent in defense against the dark arts does his confidence begin to rise, but it is hard-won. Unlike Harry, who is celebrated and encouraged, Neville has had to fight for every inch of recognition. In one telling moment in the book, he masters a complex spell and beams with pride, not because he seeks praise, but because, for once, he doesn't feel like a failure. His progress in the DA meetings is slow but steady, and his triumphs are made more meaningful because they come from struggle, not raw talent. Augusta, in her own way, begins to see this. Though she never says it outright, the book hints that she is beginning to respect Neville for who he is, not who he isn't. When she learns he fought at the Department of Mysteries, she reportedly tells others that he is finally living up to the Longbottom name. It may seem like faint praise, but for Neville, it's a breakthrough. The idea that he is no longer a disappointment is something he has longed for. In the book, this development is subtle, handled with restraint, but it speaks volumes about the shifting dynamic between grandmother and grandson. Number 18, the story behind Sirius's two-way mirror. In the dusty confines of Number 12, Grimmauld Place, a gift changed hands that would silently echo through Harry Potter's journey in ways he could never have imagined. Wrapped in layers of hope and caution, Sirius Black handed Harry a two-way mirror, a pair, in fact, enchantments woven into glass to allow instant, secret communication. It wasn't an ordinary present, nor was it given lightly. Sirius, never one to talk about feelings openly, gave it as a lifeline, a connection between godfather and godson, meant to defy the walls of Hogwarts, the rules of Dumbledore, and even the shadows cast by war. In the book Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, this moment is fleeting, yet deeply significant. "Use it if you need me, all right?" Sirius said, pressing it into Harry's hand. But Harry, in his swirling storm of emotions, loyalty to Dumbledore, anger, grief, and the chaos of adolescence, let it gather dust in his trunk, its promise unfulfilled. As the events of the 5th year spiraled toward tragedy, the mirror remained forgotten, lying silent in a drawer beneath socks and books and teenage distractions. And when Harry was lured to the Department of Mysteries by a false vision, convinced that Sirius was being tortured in the bowels of the Ministry, he never thought to check the mirror. He rushed instead to his friends, to desperate action, to a recklessness born of love and fear. The mirror, unconsulted, could have saved him from the devastating mistake that followed, the ambush, the battle, and ultimately Sirius's death. And after it was over, after the veil had swallowed Sirius whole, Harry found the mirror again. He stared into it, willing Sirius to appear, to speak, to undo the irreversible, but the glass remained blank, cold, and empty. Staring into the mirror, he felt as though his heart would break all over again, the book says. This painful, symbolic artifact, the mirror that could have changed everything, is entirely missing from the film adaptation, not mentioned, not glimpsed, not even hinted at. Sirius's final interactions with Harry in the movie are reduced to quick scenes of camaraderie, but the emotional tether, the literal magical link that tied them together in the novel, is severed from the cinematic universe. Viewers see Sirius fall in the Ministry and Harry's resulting anguish, but they are not shown the full weight of his guilt, the soul-crushing realization that had he used the mirror, he might have spoken to Sirius and discovered the truth. In omitting the mirror, the film dulls the blade of regret that cuts Harry so deeply in the book. The consequence of this omission reaches further than just emotional impact. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, and especially the Deathly Hallows, the mirror re-emerges. Shards of it appear in Harry's possession, and more curiously, a blue eye, strikingly familiar, watches him from its depths. In the film version of the Deathly Hallows, this mirror appears with no explanation, creating confusion for those who have not read the books. The sight of Aberforth Dumbledore watching Harry through the glass feels disjointed, its origin never clarified. But in the novels, this mystery is carefully constructed. After Sirius's death, Harry clings to the broken mirror not just as a relic, but as a symbol of his unresolved grief. It isn't until much later that he discovers Sirius had a second mirror, and that it passed into Aberforth's hands, who then uses it to monitor and ultimately help Harry. The storytelling power of the mirror lies in what it represents. A second chance never taken, a tool of connection rendered useless by forgetfulness, a gift from a godfather who longed to stay close. Harry's failure to use it is not simply a plot device, it's an emotional crossroads. After the tragedy, Harry's regret is raw and unfiltered. He had kept the mirror Sirius had given him, but he had not once thought to use it. This sentence carries the weight of all. That was lost, not just Sirius, but the possibility of saving him. This adds a layer of maturity to Harry's character. He learns painfully that even the best intentions and deepest love can be undermined by carelessness or inaction. The film's decision to exclude this object flattened Harry's internal world. Without it, his grief becomes an external spectacle, screams, tears, anger, but lacks the internalized pain that defines the post-Sirius chapters in the book. The mirror was not only a magical artifact, but a metaphor for missed opportunities, for the painful clarity that comes too late. Its silence mirrored Harry's own failure to listen, to trust, to seek the truth. In the book, when he looks into it after Sirius is gone, the words are haunting. There was no reply. The mirror was nothing but a cracked piece of glass now. It is here that Harry confronts the reality of death in its most unforgiving form, not just loss, but the finality of it, the inability to undo a choice. The absence of the mirror also robs Sirius of depth. In the film, his character feels truncated, his concern for Harry less tangible. But the gift of the mirror in the book is a quiet act of love. It's Sirius saying, "I know I can't always be there, but I'll try." It bridges the tension between Sirius's wish to be a protective father figure and Harry's entrapment in a world that keeps them apart. When that bridge is ignored, Sirius becomes just another casualty in the fight against Voldemort, rather than a deeply human, deeply tragic figure whose bond with Harry was both a blessing and a burden. The domino effect of removing the mirror doesn't stop with Sirius's death. It muddles the storyline in the 7th installment, where the fragments of the mirror play a crucial role. Aberforth Dumbledore's intervention through the mirror allows Harry and his friends to escape death and enter Hogwarts in Deathly Hallows. Readers who follow the arc of the mirror understand the strange blue eye as Aberforth's and grasp the clever continuity that links Sirius, the Dumbledores, and Harry's fate. Without that background, film-only audiences are left guessing. Who is behind the glass? Why does Harry have it? When did this connection begin? The moment lacks emotional resonance because its foundations were never laid. Even more tragically, without the mirror, there is no space for Harry's self-reflection on his impulsiveness. The book allows him to sit in his grief, to explore the what-ifs that plague real loss. It shows the slow, grinding process of mourning where memory and regret collide. The mirror is not just a window, it becomes a wall that he cannot pass through, a reminder of youth's arrogance and the cost of ignoring warnings. This is part of what makes Harry such a powerful literary figure. His mistakes shape him as much as his triumphs. He does not only survive Voldemort, he survives himself. In a story so rich with magical objects from time-turners to Horcruxes, the mirror of Sirius Black is among the most personal and tragic. It's small, quiet magic, the kind that matters not in battles but in the heart. Its role in Order of the Phoenix is not one of action but of emotion. It frames the relationship between two orphans of war, two men seeking family in a world that has denied them peace. When Sirius falls, the mirror breaks, and something within Harry breaks too. And yet, the mirror endures in pieces, just like Harry's hope, just like his guilt. One might argue that the filmmakers simply didn't have time, that other elements took priority, but the result of such a decision is a narrative that leans more on spectacle than introspection. It's not just a matter of fan service or lore accuracy. The mirror is part of the emotional scaffolding of Harry's journey. Its absence left a hollow space where growth and pain once were. It is in those silent, unexplained absences that film Harry differs most from book Harry. The boy in the books is haunted not just by enemies, but by choices. The boy in the books carries pieces of a broken mirror as a talisman, not of hope, but of failure. And yet, it is that very failure that teaches him to look more closely, to question, to never again take for granted the quiet magic of those who love him. The strength of Rowling's world lies not just in dragons and duels, but in mirrors and meaning. The emotional weight of a teenage boy failing to speak to his godfather, not out of rebellion, but from sheer forgetfulness, hits harder than any curse. And when that boy grows into a man who treasures the broken glass, who learns to see beyond reflections and seek truth, we are reminded of what the mirror truly offered. Not communication, but connection. Not escape, but understanding. That story, painfully and beautifully told in the book, never flickered to life on the screen. And something very human was lost in the silence. Number 19, the trio's OWL results. In the flickering twilight of Hogwarts' most troubled year, when the very walls seemed to tremble under the weight of secrets, suspicion, and the ever-looming return of Voldemort, there existed a quiet moment of humanity that the film adaptation of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix silently erased. It was a moment that echoed something J.K. Rowling wove so delicately into her books, the notion that even in times of darkness, the ordinary rhythms of life continue. In the book, after the traumatic battle at the Department of Mysteries, after the death of Sirius Black, and after the truth of Voldemort's return could no longer be denied, Harry, Ron, and Hermione received their ordinary wizarding level OWL results. It was not a triumphant scene, nor one filled with spectacle, but it was one laced with deep emotional texture, quietly anchoring the trio back into the reality of being students in a magical school. The OWL results did not arrive with grandeur. They came by owlpost, like so many other things at Hogwarts, slipping into the narrative not with fanfare, but with the intimacy of a letter. And yet, these pieces of parchment represented something profound. They were a reminder that amidst the unraveling of the wizarding world, teenagers were still measured by exams, still dreaming of futures that might not even exist, still judged by professors more concerned with grades than Grindelwalds or Death Eaters. The moment was so deeply rooted in character and theme, but in the cinematic retelling, it vanished entirely. In the book, Harry discovers that he has passed 14 subjects and earned decent marks in most, despite the year's relentless chaos. His grades were a testament to his perseverance. He received and exceeds expectations in Defense Against the Dark Arts, the subject he not only excelled in academically but had also lived through in real life. It was the most personal of his subjects, and he had become a leader in it through Dumbledore's army, training fellow students in spells that would one day save their lives. The book says, Harry scanned the rest of the grades, his eyes lingering a moment on the P for divination, but rising with quiet pride at the E for Defense Against the Dark Arts. That single line tells a world of truth. Harry was never one to seek academic glory, yet here he stood, with grades that spoke of strength and effort. It also signified how his real battles were inseparable from his academic ones. Failing divination, Trelawney's cryptic nonsense, was a quiet irony. That very year, Harry had fulfilled a prophecy he didn't even understand, while the professor who taught predictions failed to see her most famous one through her own misted lens. Ron's results offered their own subtle arc of growth. Often dismissed as the comic relief or the underachiever, in comparison to Hermione, he quietly earned respectable grades, including an E in Defense Against the Dark Arts and even a P in divination, which he seemed to wear as a badge of honor. These results mattered for Ron more than they appeared to. He had grown from the insecure younger brother into someone who could survive actual battles and still pass his exams. The book did not need to shout this. It merely let the results speak for themselves, allowing readers to draw strength from his silent development. Hermione, of course, earned 10 outstandings and only 1 E. In Defense Against the Dark Arts, this detail is important, even poetic. Hermione, for all her brilliance, still lived within the confines of what books could teach her. That her weakest subject was the one Harry excelled in symbolized the way their strengths balanced one another. Her slight stumble in defense was not a failure, but a nod to the fact that magic learned through fear and fire was different from that absorbed from books. It was, in a strange way, a tribute to Harry's lived experience, proof that practical knowledge born from trauma had its own validity. The omission of this OWL results scene from the movie stripped the narrative of a crucial emotional grounding. Without it, the 5th year at Hogwarts feels like a battlefield with no academic structure, as though the school had dissolved entirely into rebellion and despair. In truth, Rowling was painting a much more nuanced picture. The OWLs served as a metaphor for persistence, for growing up in the shadows of war while clinging to the rituals of youth. The exams symbolized the students' refusal to let the darkness define them. This balance between ordinary life and impending doom was a central theme throughout the book. Hogwarts was always more than a battleground. It was a sanctuary, a school, a place where students still fretted over grades, crushes and quidditch, even as they prepared for war. Dumbledore himself insisted that education must continue even when the Ministry sought to twist it for its own ends. The OWLs were the proof that the institution of Hogwarts, though battered and corrupted by Umbridge's regime, still had a pulse. The pressure of exams also served as a psychological portrait of Harry's inner world. He was not just fighting Death Eaters, he was fighting fatigue, grief, and anxiety. That he managed to sit through 10 exams while suffering from nightmarish visions and Ministry surveillance shows the depth of his resilience. The reader sees that the real triumph was not just surviving the Department of Mysteries, it was enduring the mundane while living through the extraordinary. The film adaptation, in omitting this, lost a subtle but powerful thread of Harry's character. The exams themselves were also scenes of character revelation. The defense against the dark arts practical was conducted by Griselda Marchbanks, a respected examiner who personally commended Harry for his excellent wand work. She even said, "I've been examining students for decades, and I must say, he shows real flair." This moment was not just an ego boost, it was an acknowledgement from the establishment that Harry's experiences had turned him into something more than a student. It was institutional validation for a boy who had spent the year being discredited. Beyond individual characters, the OWL, results offered a snapshot of the broader student body. Students like Neville Longbottom, often dismissed and underestimated, also showed growth. Neville's dedication in Dumbledore's army and his improved performance in subjects like herbology and defense hinted at his coming transformation. These results were not just grades, they were forecasts of who these children were becoming. In a war story, it is easy to overlook the classroom, but Rowling made sure that the classroom and the battlefield existed side by side. The exams were not distractions from the plot, they were reminders of what was being fought for, they were symbols of continuity. Even in a world where evil had returned and the government was collapsing, teenagers still sat for exams, still cared about their futures, still wanted to prove themselves. The reality of trauma is that it rarely stops life. It coils around it, invades it, lives alongside it. The OWL scene encapsulated this perfectly. After facing unspeakable horrors, the students returned to their beds, waited for owls, opened envelopes, and read cold letters filled with grades. It was haunting in its normalcy. It emphasized that the war had not paused childhood, only warped it. Removing this detail from the film also diminished the arc of Dumbledore's army. Their efforts were not just rebellious acts against Umbridge, but real preparation. The results proved that what they had learned was not just symbolic defiance, but genuine education. It also reminded the audience that the Hogwarts staff, despite the Ministry's interference, still believed in recognizing effort and excellence. The psychological recovery that follows trauma often involves returning to routines. For Harry, Ron, and Hermione, opening their OWL results was such a moment. It was a brief return to structure, to a world where effort was measured and acknowledged. In that act, they reclaimed a piece of their stolen childhood. It was not a loud scene, but it was essential. In the cinematic version, by skipping this quiet yet potent chapter, the film denied the trio their small but meaningful victory. It also denied viewers a richer understanding of how the war affected every layer of life, even school transcripts. In doing so, it lost a vital heartbeat of Rowling's storytelling, the unshakable persistence of normal life, even as the shadows fall. Number 20. The full prophecy is never revealed. In the dusty silence of the Department of Mysteries, a sphere of glass lay shattered on the floor, its contents already lost in the chaos. For many watching Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix on screen, that scene may have passed as just another action-filled climax. But within the pages of J.K. Rowling's novel, that moment carries the weight of the entire series. The prophecy that defined Harry's destiny, one of the most profound revelations in the wizarding world, was not merely the cryptic phrase offered in the film, "Neither can live while the other survives." It was a deeper, layered truth, holding within it themes of choice, destiny, and the haunting consequences of fear. The true text of the prophecy, as revealed in Dumbledore's office after the chaos at the Ministry, is not short. It is not a riddle. It is a carefully structured vision that challenges the very foundation of the series' good versus evil narrative. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the seventh month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. And either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the seventh month dies. These words, delivered by Sybil Trelawney in a moment of rare clarity, expose far more than a singular destiny. They speak of potential, of missed possibilities, and of the terrible burden of being chosen. What the film fails to show is that Voldemort had a choice. He was presented with two children, both born at the end of July, both to parents who had defied him 3 times. One was Harry Potter, the other was Neville Longbottom. The prophecy did not name Harry specifically. It offered Voldemort a fork in the road, a test not of magic but of fear. Voldemort chose Harry, and in doing so he fulfilled the prophecy himself. He marked Harry as his equal when he attacked the Potters, and inadvertently gave Harry the lightning bolt scar. It is not fate that singled Harry out. It was Voldemort's decision, shaped by his paranoia, that created the Chosen One. The irony is chilling. Voldemort, obsessed with prophecy and domination over death, essentially wrote his own downfall. Had he chosen Neville, it is possible, however unlikely, that the story might have taken a different path. But Voldemort, born of fear and incapable of understanding love or humility, saw more of himself in Harry. The child who, like him, was half-blood. The child who, like him, had survived early trauma. It was not prophecy that doomed Voldemort. It was pride and fear masquerading as strategy. This revelation alters the way we see Harry. He is not the boy destined to defeat evil. He is the boy made to defeat evil by the very hand of the enemy he was forced to fight. His life was not forged by a divine decree, but by the trauma inflicted upon him. This is a narrative far more human and harrowing than the vague mysticism presented in the film. It removes the illusion of myth and replaces it with the tragedy of circumstance. Harry's power lies not in being a predestined hero, but in rising to meet the challenge he never asked for. The removal of this detail in the film robs the audience of one of the most powerful moral undercurrents in the entire series. It's not merely about good and evil, it's about how our choices, especially those made in fear, shape the future. Voldemort tried to control fate and became its servant. Harry, who never sought power, ultimately embodied the kind of strength Voldemort could never comprehend. As Dumbledore said, it was, I believe, the greatest mistake of his life that he ever learned of the prophecy. That mistake was not in hearing it, but in acting upon it. In the book, the scene in Dumbledore's office after Sirius's death is not a simple explanation of plot. It is a confessional moment, heavy with sorrow and truth. Dumbledore, having withheld the prophecy for years, finally tells Harry the full content. He speaks not as a wise headmaster, but as a man burdened with regret. "You are the chosen one because Voldemort chose you," he tells Harry. This line reveals the fragility of fate. Had Voldemort chosen differently, Neville would have borne the scar. Neville might have grown up in the shadow of prophecy, but instead it is Harry who bears that weight and the guilt of it. This overlooked detail also reshapes our understanding of Neville. Often depicted as clumsy and timid, Neville was every bit the potential hero. He too was born as July ended. He too had parents who had defied Voldemort 3 times. The film simplifies his role to comic relief or, at best, a brave companion. But in the book, Neville is the silent echo of what might have been. His life could have followed Harry's had Voldemort feared a different name. The film misses this parallel entirely, losing the poetic duality of their stories. By reducing the prophecy to a single sentence, the movie erases the very soul of that chapter. It turns the battle in the Department of Mysteries into a loud spectacle, filled with spinning rooms and shattered shelves. But the true climax is not the fight, it is the conversation afterward. It is Harry's devastation upon learning that his life has been shaped not by love or merit, but by someone else's terror. That pain, that realization, is what forces him to grow. The prophecy is not a magical riddle, it is a psychological turning point. And it is this psychological depth that gives the books their enduring impact. Harry is not special because he was chosen by fate. He is special because he chose to keep fighting, even when he learned that his life was a byproduct of cruelty. The full prophecy reveals that the power Harry possesses, the one Voldemort does not, is love. Not just the love of his mother, which saved him once, but his own capacity to feel, to care, to grieve. That is what Voldemort could never understand. In the stripped-down version given by the film, this nuance disappears. The prophecy becomes a plot device, not a mirror held up to the characters. The audience is never told that Harry's chosen status is the result of someone else's fear. They are never shown that Voldemort created his own demise. They are never asked to consider that Neville's quiet courage might have stood in Harry's place. All of that is lost in the noise. The book's version challenges the reader to think. What does it mean to be chosen? Can prophecy coexist with free will? And if our enemies create us, are we still free to define ourselves? These are the questions that Rowling placed at the heart of her story. The film, focused more on pacing and spectacle, bypassed them in favor of a cleaner narrative. But clean narratives rarely tell the full truth. Messy, complicated revelations, like the full prophecy, are what make characters real. This omission also reflects a broader issue in adaptations. When nuance is sacrificed for time, the result is often a flattening of emotional complexity. Harry's journey is not merely one of battles and bravery, it is one of identity. Learning that he was made, not born, to be a hero is a moment of existential crisis. That depth is necessary to understand his choices in the final 2 books. Without it, the Harry of the films seems to march forward on rails of destiny rather than through the fog of trauma and growth. Ultimately, this lost detail diminishes the moral gravity of the story. In the book, the prophecy's meaning is not fixed. It is a mirror reflecting the choices of those who hear it. Dumbledore warns that prophecies can only bind those who believe in them. Voldemort believed he acted, and by acting, he set the wheels in motion. Harry, in contrast, learns the truth and continues to act not out of prophecy, but out of compassion, loyalty, and love. That is the defining difference. By ignoring the full scope of the prophecy, the film misses the opportunity to elevate Harry's arc into something more than myth. It is not magic that made him powerful, it was his ability to feel. His courage was not born of destiny but of choice. Voldemort marked him as an equal, but it was Harry who earned the right to be more than a weapon. He became a symbol, not of fate fulfilled, but of humanity embraced, and that is the true prophecy. Number 21, Hermione was the real founder of Dumbledore's army. In the shadowy corners of Hogwarts, as fear and silence crept through its halls during the rise of Dolores Umbridge, a quiet rebellion was beginning to form. The film adaptation of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix tells us that this resistance was born from Harry Potter's will, that he, driven by frustration and purpose, took it upon himself to teach his peers defense against the dark arts. But the book tells a different story, a more intricate one where the mind behind the rebellion was not the boy who lived, but Hermione Granger, Kreacher, the girl who thought 10 steps ahead, who understood systems and how to subvert them, and whose moral clarity led to decisive action. The film removes her strategic genius, reducing her to an encouraging presence rather than the architect of a secret revolution. It begins not in the room of requirement, but in the very heart of distrust. When the students realize that Professor Umbridge's curriculum offers no real magic, just memorization and obedience, many complain. But only Hermione steps forward with a plan. In the book, she is the one who confronts Harry and Ron in the Gryffindor common room and makes the case. She has thought about this deeply. We need a teacher, a proper one. Someone who's actually faced things, she says, drawing a straight line between fear and necessity. It is not just an impulsive suggestion. It is a carefully considered move in a dangerous game. She knows Umbridge's influence is growing. And that knowledge, real knowledge, is their only weapon. And she knows that Harry, no matter how reluctant, is the only one who can teach them. Hermione doesn't just float the idea and step back, she plans it all. She chooses the Hog's Head for the initial meeting, not just a random pub, but a place where they're unlikely to be overheard or recognized. She calculates the risk of eavesdropping, notes the low attendance of students there, and makes sure the group keeps a low profile. When Zachariah Smith presses Harry during that meeting, questioning his qualifications, it is Hermione who defends him. She doesn't just propose the idea, she shapes the narrative, presents Harry as the only hope against a corrupt system, and galvanizes the group into taking that first brave step. But what truly reveals her strategic brilliance is what she does after the meeting. In a moment that the film completely erases, Hermione crafts a magical contract, a masterstroke of enchantment and psychological pressure. Everyone who agrees to join signs their name on a piece of parchment. But the parchment is cursed. If any member betrays the group, their name will be branded with boils, broadcasting their treachery for all to see. This isn't just protective, it is preventative. It changes the group's dynamic. Suddenly, joining Dumbledore's army is not a casual commitment, it is a pact of loyalty, sealed with the threat of punishment. It is Hermione who turns a gathering of teenagers into an underground resistance. The book makes it clear how significant this move is. When Marietta Edgecombe, under pressure from her mother, an employee of the ministry, reveals the existence of the group, it is Hermione's spell that exposes her. Her face breaks out in ugly, disfiguring pustules, spelling out the word sneak. This is not an accidental reaction. It is calculated. "You're lucky it's not worse," Hermione says, calm and unrepentant. She knew betrayal was possible and took measures to ensure that betrayal had a cost. It's a moment that redefines her. She is not just clever. She is prepared to make hard choices. She is prepared to protect her friends with sharp, unyielding tools. This moment, and everything leading up to it, reshapes the image of Hermione Granger. She is no longer the girl with a hand in the air, begging to answer a question. She is the commander behind enemy lines, orchestrating an illegal student movement under the noses of both Umbridge and the Ministry of Magic. Her magic is not loud or flashy, but it is precise, it is efficient, and it is powerful. The film diminishes all of this. It shows her nodding beside Harry, speaking when spoken to, helping but not leading. It erases the complexity of her moral stance, the fact that she believed so strongly in doing what was right that she was willing to punish betrayal herself. And that betrayal, the betrayal by Marietta, was not just a plot device. It was Hermione's test of trust. The spell she cast, the consequences she prepared, these were acts of someone who understood how power works. Hermione did not just fight the system, she mimicked it in miniature. She built an internal structure governed by accountability and secrecy with clearly defined lines of responsibility. She turned the parchment into a sacred document, one that bound every member with invisible strings of magic and honor. It is one of the most underrated demonstrations of leadership in the entire series. Moreover, this wasn't the only moment where Hermione's strategic thinking eclipsed those around her. She is the one who suggests using the room of requirement, not simply a convenient empty space, but a room that would respond to their needs, provide them with weapons, space, and safety. It's a place that cannot be found unless one knows how to look, and she knows how to look. In the book, she reads about it in Hogwarts, a history, and connects the dots linking scattered information into one complete picture. She brings not just ideas, but execution. She reads, deduces, plans, and acts. The Room of Requirement becomes the heart of Dumbledore's army, and its beating heart was Hermione. While Harry taught spells, she managed the logistics. She ensured that everyone arrived on time, that the sessions remained secret, that the parchment kept track of who was involved. In a real sense, she was the general manager, the silent co-leader. The film sadly offers almost none of this. Her presence is trimmed down, softened. She smiles at Harry's lessons. She claps. She appears, but she does not lead. Her sharp edges are filed down to fit a simpler mold, the loyal friend. Yet even her loyalty in the book is more complex than the film shows. Hermione supports Harry, yes, but she also challenges him. She tells him hard truths. When he doubts himself, she reminds him of what he's accomplished. When he panics, she anchors him with reason. But she also does not hesitate to act when Harry wavers. She is not just his echo, she is often his conscience. The scene where she convinces him to teach is not a scene of flattery. It is persuasion through logic, through necessity, through a deep understanding of the stakes. "You're the best," she says, not to boost his ego, but because she has analyzed all options and made a conclusion. She leads him toward his destiny not with praise, but with clarity. Her curse on the parchment, often overlooked, is one of the darkest spells cast by a student in the series. It reveals the steel beneath her scholarship. Hermione is willing to walk into moral grey areas to protect what she loves. She is a character who understands that resistance is not clean. It requires sacrifice, discomfort, and sometimes cruelty. This Hermione, the one who is both fierce and kind, brilliant and ruthless, is lost in the film. And in losing her, the audience loses a fundamental truth, that it was not just Harry who carried the war forward, but the quiet warriors like Hermione who made resistance possible at all. This narrative shift also matters because it reshapes gender perception in the series. Hermione's leadership, when erased or diluted, sends a message that the real heroes must be bold and loud like Harry, while the girls offer support. But the books never imply this. In fact, Rowling goes out of her way to give Hermione agency, to make her actions count. Removing those actions removes a pillar of the story's moral architecture. Hermione did not just support the revolution, she built it, brick by brick, word by word, spell by spell. Even Fred and George, the masters of mischief, acknowledge her brilliance. When the Boyle's curse takes effect on Marietta, they are not horrified, they are impressed. "Blimey, Hermione," Fred says, "you're scary sometimes." It's said half in jest, but full of truth. Hermione is scary because she is the mind that predicts betrayal, the force that arms the innocent, the strategist who hides daggers in parchment and kindness in spells. The film makes her sweet. The book makes her dangerous, but in the best possible way. This is the Hermione who lives in the shadows of the story's bigger arcs. The one who reads the laws before she breaks them, who sees the weaknesses in the system and patches them with knowledge and magic. In a time when the ministry is spreading lies, when truth is punished, when fear grips every corridor of Hogwarts, it is Hermione who insists on action, not for glory, not for fame, but because doing nothing is a kind of complicity. She understands the cost of silence, and that is why Dumbledore's army exists. Without Hermione Granger, there would be no parchment, no contracts, no room of requirement, no army. Just students waiting for someone to save them. She knew no one was coming, so she made them save themselves. Number 22. Filch's new obsession with punishing students. Argus Filch had always been a grim fixture in the shadowed corridors of Hogwarts. skulking like a bitter spectre with his dustpan and his resentments. But in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, he undergoes a disturbing transformation. Once a figure of ridicule and irritation, he becomes something far darker, the eager enforcer of Dolores Umbridge's authoritarian regime. Yet in the film adaptation, this chilling metamorphosis is glossed over, lost in fleeting background shots and the occasional grumble. The book, however, paints a far more vivid and unsettling portrait, one that reveals just how deep the rot of power had seeped into Hogwarts' very stones. Filch does not simply obey Umbridge, he thrives under her rule. For years he had been confined by Dumbledore's leniency, his fondness for second chances, his belief in the goodness of students. Filch, a squib, simmering in his own inadequacy, loathed that philosophy. It stifled his lust for order and punishment. But with Umbridge in power, the chains are snapped. Suddenly his fantasies are not only permitted, they are encouraged. When she takes over as Hogwarts High Inquisitor, Filch becomes her most faithful servant. He begins patrolling the halls with an energy he had never shown before, eyes gleaming, whispering of chains and whips with sick anticipation. In Chapter 19, titled The Lion and the Serpent, J.K., Rowling lets us glimpse the grotesque excitement brewing in Filch. "I've got the chains ready," he hisses to Umbridge. "Just say the word." There is a twisted joy in him, a revival of purpose. He believes that his moment has finally come. The era of pain, his era, is about to begin. This single line is not just background flavor, it is the encapsulation of what the new Hogwarts has become. Not just a school under surveillance, but a prison ripe for torture. And Filch, once a joke among students, is its self-appointed jailer. He begins laying traps literally and metaphorically. In the book, Filch starts planting trick steps, enchanted ropes, and other mechanisms to catch students in the act of breaking the endless new decrees that Umbridge posts on the walls, decrees 22 through 127 and beyond. The scene in which Fred and George Weasley are caught by one such trap, only to retaliate with fireworks, becomes a turning point in the battle for Hogwarts' soul. Filch's traps are not just physical, they are symbolic. Hogwarts is no longer a place of learning and mischief, but a maze of fear. And he doesn't stop at setting traps. He roams the halls, listening at doors, springing from shadows, hoping, longing, to catch someone in the act. Harry reflects on this growing paranoia. It was as though Umbridge had given him some kind of new battery. He could often be heard ranting happily in the corridors. The word happily here is a cold shiver. Filch is not just doing a job, he is savouring it. The bitterness that once curdled behind his eyes now fuels his every step. His obsession with catching students becomes particularly intense when he suspects Harry and his friends of creating the secret student group, Dumbledore's Army. He follows Harry around the castle, sniffing the air like a bloodhound, interrogating him in front of the tapestry near the room of requirement. "You're up to something, I know it," he growls. But the magic of the room eludes him, mocking his impotent rage. These scenes, packed with tension and dark humor, are almost entirely absent from the film. What remains is a watered-down version, a few comic shots of Filch hanging new decrees, nothing more. But in the book, his desperation peaks when he believes he has finally caught them. Filch runs to Umbridge, breathless with excitement, declaring he has found the hideout of the DA. "I've got them! I've got them!" he screams, practically shaking with glee. Yet the betrayal does not belong to him. It comes instead from Marietta Edgecombe. Once again, Filch is denied the glory. The irony is cruel. He is a hunter who never makes the kill. But this never stops him from trying, from fantasizing about chains and dungeons and students screaming for mercy. Even outside the DA subplot, Filch is omnipresent. He is the one who gleefully enforces the bans on laughter, music, and spontaneous gatherings. He chases Peeves with an increased sense of vengeance, now that Umbridge supports his efforts. But Peeves, the trickster spirit of the school, resists him at every turn. Their battles become symbolic: chaos versus control, joy versus repression. In one memorable moment, Peeves swings from a chandelier yelling, "It unscrews the other way!" as Filch howls in impotent rage below. The students laugh even under the weight of fear, and Filch grinds his teeth. Filch's role in Umbridge's administration is not merely physical, it's psychological. His constant presence makes students uneasy. He embodies the surveillance state that Umbridge constructs. With every footstep echoing through the halls, students wonder, is this freedom's last breath? Is Hogwarts the safe haven, now beyond saving? Through Filch, Rowling reveals how quickly ordinary institutions can become tools of oppression when authority is handed to the wrong hands, not just to tyrants like Umbridge, but to eager collaborators like Filch. And the transformation isn't just external. Filch's demeanor changes, no longer the hunched janitor mumbling about dirt. He walks with more vigor, more direction. There is pride in his cruelty. When he catches a fourth year out of bed, his eyes glint. "Detention," he rasps, "and I'll see to it myself." In the past, he had to defer punishment to professors. Now he relishes the possibility of becoming the executioner. This new confidence is terrifying because it reveals how power can twist the weak into monsters. One cannot help but reflect on the scene when Umbridge is dragged into the forest by centaurs. In the chaos, Filch is notably absent. His reign, like hers, ends not with a bang, but with a whimper. When Dumbledore returns, the magic is restored, and Filch's moment in the sun evaporates. Yet the memory lingers. Students remember his delight in their suffering. Trust is not so easily repaired. The wounds of surveillance, of betrayal, of being hunted within one's own school take longer to heal. In the film, these layers are flattened. Filch appears now and then, usually in comic relief. He hammers up decrees, mutters to himself, chases the Weasleys' fireworks in a pantomime of panic. But the darkness, the grotesque joy he finds in punishment, the longing for the return of torture, this is all erased. The viewer is left with a caricature, not a character, and something essential is lost. The horror of Umbridge's rule lies not just in her actions, but in those who help her, in the eagerness of little tyrants like Filch. It is no small detail. Rowling used Filch as a warning. He is the kind of man who waits for cruelty to become legal, the kind who justifies pain if the rules allow it. In an era where Hogwarts is no longer safe, his presence is a constant reminder that evil does not only arrive with banners and battles. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, through keys and chains, through men like Filch who mistake vengeance for justice. He represents a different flavor of villainy. Unlike Voldemort, who kills for power, or Umbridge, who crushes for control, Filch punishes because he enjoys watching others shrink. He is not powerful. He is not intelligent, but he is dangerous, precisely because he thinks cruelty is finally giving him purpose. It is a subtle but terrifying transformation, one the book captures with sharp precision, and the film regrettably ignores. In the end, Filch's descent is a mirror. It shows what Hogwarts could become if kindness is abandoned, if laughter is banned, if trust is replaced with suspicion. He is the man who would turn a school into a cell block. And for a time, he almost succeeds. That is the detail the movie forgot, the quiet horror of watching a bitter man finally live his dream. Number 23, Umbridge's full punishment from the Centaurs. Dolores Umbridge had ruled Hogwarts with an iron wand, a bright pink cardigan, and a smile that was more terrifying than comforting. Her tyranny in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix reached its peak in the final chapters, when she foolishly ventured into the Forbidden Forest, believing she could manipulate and intimidate anything in her path, even magical creatures older and wilder than human memory. The film version of this moment is brief and nearly comical. She disappears into the trees, dragged away by centaurs, never to be seen again in that movie. But in the book, this scene carries the weight of real consequences. It is darker, far more disturbing, and delivers a lesson that the film chose to flatten. Some traumas leave marks that even magic cannot erase. In the book, Umbridge's downfall is not a quick and easy comeuppance. It is a descent into real fear. She enters the forest not as a villain prepared to battle, but as an arrogant bureaucrat convinced that her ministry authority will shield her. When she and Harry confront the Centaurs, she shrieks about rules and decrees, waving parchment in front of creatures who have long rejected the shackles of human law. Her ignorance of their nature, her inability to comprehend their resentment toward the ministry, is almost painful to witness. The scene becomes a reckoning, not just for her, but for the very idea that power entitles one to safety. Centaurs in the Harry Potter universe are not merely background creatures or convenient plot devices. They are beings with deep traditions, ancient magic, and justified fury at how wizards have treated them for centuries. The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures has always classified centaurs as beasts, a term they openly reject. Umbridge, in her self-important blindness, fails to grasp that she is facing a proud and angry people. Her decision to insult them, to call them filthy half-breeds, seals her fate. What happens next in the book is never fully described in graphic detail, but it doesn't need to be. The implications are chilling. The centaurs seize her. They take her deeper into the woods. The sounds of her screams fade into the dark canopy, and Harry is left behind, stunned and helpless. The reader feels a cold satisfaction, but also a shiver of unease. This is not justice served with a flourish, it is nature's wrath unleashed on a woman who believed she was untouchable. The film, by skipping the aftermath, denies this scene its emotional and moral complexity. When Umbridge is finally found and rescued, because, yes, she is rescued, unlike in the film where her story simply evaporates, she is no longer the same woman. The iron grip, the venomous smirk, the sense of invulnerability, all gone. She is described as being in a state of profound psychological trauma. Lying in the hospital wing, she trembles at the mention of the forest. She refuses to speak. Her eyes are wide with the kind of terror that cannot be reasoned away. The book says she was in shock, her eyes bulging, her hands trembling so badly she couldn't hold a cup of tea. This moment matters because it punctures the illusion of control that Umbridge built so carefully throughout the story. Her walls of order, her proclamations, her cruel detentions, none of it protected her in the wilderness. And unlike most magical punishments in the series, which are dramatic but fleeting, this one leaves visible and lasting scars. It reminds readers that the magical world is not sanitized, not immune to real consequences. Even a powerful witch, supported by the Ministry of Magic, can be broken by forces beyond her comprehension. The Centaurs themselves do not reappear to explain their actions, and they don't need to. Their silence says everything. Their judgment is final, their anger cold and ancient. Firenze, the centaur who chose to teach divination at Hogwarts and was thus cast out by his own herd, becomes a symbol of the rift between the magical and the mystical. His presence in the hospital wing after Umbridge's return only deepens the tension. She recoils at the sight of him. Her fear is instinctive now, burned into her mind. The mighty Umbridge is reduced to a shell. In choosing not to show this aftermath, the film adaptation unintentionally spares Umbridge from the true consequences of her actions. The cinematic version turns her fate into a quick gag, a moment of catharsis without weight. She is dragged away screaming, and that's the end. But in the book, the gravity of her punishment lingers. It raises questions. What did the Centaurs do to her? Was it purely fear that broke her, or something darker? And most importantly, did she deserve it? Umbridge was never a caricature in the books. She was terrifying because she was real. She didn't carry a wand of skulls or speak Parseltongue. She used rules, bureaucracy, and passive-aggressive cruelty. Her punishment needed to feel just as real. The trauma she endures doesn't make her sympathetic. Rather, it shows the reader that cruelty has limits, and those who cross them might meet forces that do not play by the same rules. The change arm also affects how we perceive the forest. In the book, the Forbidden Forest is not just a spooky location, it is a place of old magic, older laws, and unpredictable outcomes. The Centaurs are its guardians, its wild heart. Their treatment of Umbridge is not framed as villainous, but as retribution. Nature has judged her. This narrative is powerful because it reminds readers that the magical world isn't ruled solely by wands and spells. There are older powers still. Furthermore, Umbridge's fear of the forest becomes symbolic. It is not just the trees or the centaurs she fears, it is the loss of power, the shattering of her illusion. Her trauma becomes a metaphor for the reckoning she long delayed. In the classroom, she was a dictator. In the forest, she was prey. And that reversal stays with her even after her return. The quote, "She keeps muttering about the forest, she won't say anything else," stays etched in the mind, a chilling reminder that some punishments cannot be healed by potions or time. The novel does not celebrate Umbridge's suffering. It doesn't glorify revenge, but it does insist that actions have consequences, even in a magical world. When a character uses her authority to torment students, suppress truth, and embrace fascism under the guise of order, the story demands a moment of reckoning. The Centaurs provide that moment, and the psychological toll it takes on Umbridge proves that magic, for all its wonder, can still reflect real-world darkness. By removing this thread, the film fails to deliver the full weight of Umbridge's arc. It presents her as a one-note villain who disappears in a puff of narrative smoke. The viewer is denied the chance to understand how fragile power can be, how quickly a tyrant can become a victim in the wrong setting, and most importantly, the film loses an opportunity to deepen the lore of magical creatures who are not merely side characters but entities with history, purpose, and agency. The book makes you uncomfortable. That's its strength. It doesn't let you laugh off Umbridge's end. It forces you to wonder what it would take to break someone like her, and whether breaking her was even right. It asks readers to step beyond the binary of good and evil and consider the vast, grey middle. And in doing so, it paints a fuller, more haunting portrait of justice in the wizarding world. Umbridge's breakdown isn't just about fear, it's about the loss of identity. She was the enforcer, the punisher, the overseer of pain. The forest stripped that from her. Her silence in the hospital wing is not cowardice. It's the void left behind when a person's belief in their invincibility vanishes, and that silence echoes louder than any scream. In the world of Harry Potter, where evil is often flashy and dramatic, Dolores Umbridge was a different kind of horror. She represented quiet tyranny, the erosion of freedom through rules and forms. That's what made her punishment in the book so meaningful. It wasn't just poetic justice, it was necessary. By failing to show the consequences of her actions, the film let her off too easily, and it robbed the story of one of its darkest, truest lessons. No one is above the wild, not even the one who writes the rules. Number 24, Kreacher's deeper and darker role. In the shadowed corners of number 12, Grimmauld Place, there existed a figure who, at first glance, seemed little more than a muttering relic of a dying house. Kreacher, the ancient house elf of the Black family, shuffled through the halls like a ghost of another age, whispering slurs under his breath and glaring with hatred at those who dared disturb the fading grandeur of his mistress's domain. In the film adaptation of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, he appears only briefly, a bitter and comic footnote in the larger battle between good and evil. But in the book, Kreacher is no passing shadow. He is a character shaped by pain, prejudice, and broken loyalty, and his actions, though quiet and easily overlooked, have devastating consequences that echo across the pages. The film reduces him to background noise, but in truth, Kreacher is one of the most tragic and pivotal figures in the entire story. Kreacher's importance lies not in grand speeches or explosive duels, but in what he represents. He is the embodiment of a world clinging to the old ways, twisted and bitter but still loyal in the only way he knows how. In Sirius Black's childhood home, surrounded by the haunting portraits of his ancestors and the severed heads of dead house elves mounted like hunting trophies, Kreacher remains the last servant of a legacy built on blood purity and hatred. His mutterings are not random. They are the voice of a house that refuses to die, and the story of a servant who was never allowed to be anything more than a tool for the pride of his masters. J.K. Rowling reveals Kreacher's depth gradually, peeling away layers of misunderstanding. The reader is initially tempted to despise him, just as Sirius does, but hatred is rarely born from nothing. Kreacher's loyalty to the Black family is not rooted in affection, but in indoctrination, in centuries of servitude that taught him to revere his masters and scorn those who challenge their ways. Kreacher lives to serve the noble house of Black, he mutters, and it is not pride that underlies his words, but desperation. For Kreacher, the collapse of the old world is not liberation, it is chaos, and Sirius, though a rebel to his family's ideals, is still a Black. Yet he treats Kreacher with contempt, spitting words that wound deeper than spells. The relationship between Sirius and Kreacher is central to the tragedy of Order of the Phoenix, and it is almost entirely omitted from the film. Sirius loathes everything his family stood for, and Kreacher is the living reminder of that past. But instead of pitying the elf or attempting to re-educate him, Sirius lashes out. "Get out, Kreacher," he barks repeatedly, banishing the elf from rooms as one would swat away a fly. He does not see Kreacher as a person, but as a vestige of a hated past, failing to understand that Kreacher's devotion is not easily erased. The more Sirius insults him, the deeper Kreacher sinks into the arms of those who still speak his language. And it is in this silence, in the spaces between scenes, that Kreacher becomes deadly. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione sneak into the Black home and speak with Kreacher, they do not realize that the elf is not merely passive. He has left the house, he has spoken with Bellatrix Lestrange and Narcissa Malfoy, relatives who understand him and speak to his sense of duty in ways Sirius never did. He becomes a bridge between the Order and the Death Eaters, not by betrayal, but by loyalty. He was loyal to the Blacks, Dumbledore later explains, and they had always valued pure bloods. Kreacher's actions, seemingly minor, set in motion the events that lead to Sirius's death. When Harry is lured into the Department of Mysteries by a false vision of Sirius's torture, it is Kreacher who misleads him, confirming the lie because it aligns with his own beliefs. The tragedy is that Kreacher does not act out of malice, but out of conviction. The film fails to show the heartbreak of this manipulation. It does not linger on the moment when Harry learns that his beloved godfather is dead, in part because of the elf they all disregarded. It does not allow space for the guilt that follows, for Harry's realization that kindness might have changed Kreacher's path, that cruelty only hardened him. In the book, Dumbledore's explanation is a revelation. Indifference and neglect often do much more damage than outright dislike, he says, and the words are a knife to the heart. Harry, who had once treated Kreacher as a nuisance, begins to understand that even those shaped by hatred deserve compassion. Kreacher, though warped by years of servitude and pain, is not beyond redemption. This arc reaches its most poignant point in the next book, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, where Kreacher's demeanor begins to shift. Under Harry's ownership and Hermione's persistent kindness, he starts to change. The elf who once spat at them now cooks their meals, follows orders, and even shows the beginning of affection. "Master Regulus," he whispers, when recounting his old master's death, a tale that reveals the depth of his pain and devotion. Kreacher had once obeyed an order that nearly killed him. dragged back to life only by the remnants of a vow he could not break. He had watched his master die in pursuit of destroying a Horcrux and carried the trauma in silence for decades. The film does not tell this story. It does not show the broken elf who returned alone, clutching a locket that would one day become a weapon of war. There is a subtle but significant power in Kreacher's transformation. It is not the product of magic, but of respect. When Harry begins to treat him with dignity, when he thanks Kreacher and listens to him, the old elf responds with loyalty. In Deathly Hallows, Kreacher becomes a protector, risking himself to assist the trio and leading the charge in the Battle of Hogwarts. But without the background of his betrayal, without the full weight of his sorrow and redemption, the impact of his bravery is lost. The audience of the film sees an eccentric Kreacher. The reader sees a symbol of change. Kreacher is the bridge between generations, between the sins of the past and the hope of the future. He is what happens when the oppressed become complicit in their own chains. His loyalty to the Black family is not evil. It is learned, instilled over centuries, polished by grief and isolation. And when that loyalty is met with cruelty, it twists into something dangerous. Kreacher did not want Sirius dead, but his neglect helped the Death Eaters achieve that end. The real tragedy is that it could have been prevented, not through power, but through empathy. The decision to reduce Kreacher's role in the film strips Order of the Phoenix of one of its most morally complex themes. The battle between good and evil is not always fought with wands. Sometimes it is fought in the heart of a house elf, in the quiet spaces where prejudice festers and kindness is withheld. Kreacher's story forces the reader to confront uncomfortable truths about how easy it is to hate what we don't understand, and how hard it is to extend grace to those shaped by darkness. He is not lovable, but he is human, in the most painful and honest sense of the word. In the book, his presence is oppressive. He lingers in doorways, overhears secrets, and whispers venom that is easy to ignore until it's too late. He is the unseen consequence of the Black family's sins, and Sirius's refusal to engage with that legacy leads to his doom. In his final moments, Sirius is struck down not just by Bellatrix's spell, but by the weight of a house he never escaped and a servant he never forgave. Kreacher is not a hero, he is a mirror. He reflects the darkness in the wizarding world that no one wants to face, the remnants of slavery, the bitterness of exclusion, the poison of ideology. But he also reflects the possibility of healing. In showing kindness to Kreacher, Harry takes a step away from the anger that once consumed him. He learns that mercy is not weakness, but strength, and through that, Kreacher finds purpose again, not as a relic of a dying family, but as a servant to a new kind of master, one who values his voice. By overlooking Kreacher's story, the film simplifies a narrative that was never meant to be simple. It removes a layer of emotional complexity that makes Order of the Phoenix one of the most powerful entries in the series. Kreacher is not just an old elf, he is a survivor of a cruel system, a victim and an accomplice, a villain and a servant, a tragic thread in the tapestry of a world struggling to change. His story is not grand, but it matters, and without it, something vital is lost. Number 25. The battle at the Ministry is toned down. In the flickering gloom of the Department of Mysteries, Rowling's novel brings the terror of war crashing down upon teenage shoulders. The battle in the Ministry is not a cinematic light show, it is a brutal rite of passage. 6 young wizards, believing in justice but woefully unprepared for the true weight of darkness, plunge into a confrontation that marks the end of innocence. Yet when the film Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix attempts to render this on screen, something crucial is lost. The visceral fear, the physical toll, and the psychological scars are smoothed over, leaving behind a sanitized spectacle. Where the book cuts deep, the movie merely grazes. In the novel, the Department of Mysteries becomes a twisted labyrinth of danger, Harry, Hermione, Ron, Neville, Ginny, and Luna are lured into its heart, expecting to retrieve Sirius, but what they find is a trap set by Death Eaters. The battle that follows is not polished or glorious. It is messy, desperate, and terrifying. Harry watches as his friends are hurt, one by one. He cannot protect them all. He is not the hero he thought he was. He is a boy surrounded by violence, watching it swallow those he cares about. This nuance disappears in the film, where characters duck and dodge spells like dancers in a choreographed routine. In Rowling's pages, Hermione is struck by a silent but devastating spell from Antonin Dolohov. The book reads, Hermione gave a tiny "oh," as though she had just realized something unpleasant, and then she crumpled to the floor, where she lay motionless. The ambiguity of her condition is chilling. Harry doesn't know if she is dead. The panic is real, paralyzing. Ron kneels beside her, shaking, calling her name, but she does not answer. This moment defines the fragility of their mission. They are children playing at war, and the cost is becoming all too clear. The movie ignores this altogether, giving Hermione a few scratches and moving on as if nothing happened. Ron's descent into confusion is another casualty of the adaptation. In the novel, he is hit by a jinx that makes him babble uncontrollably, lose coordination, and behave erratically. He begins to giggle as he fights, swinging his wand like a bludgeon, disconnected from reality. Ron gave a grunt of pain and fell to his knees, his eyes unfocused. This is not comic relief. This is the horror of a young mind under magical assault. The spell doesn't just hurt, it distorts who he is. The movie turns this into nothing more than background noise, a forgotten subplot, a missed opportunity to show how magic can break more than bones. Ginny Weasley, fierce and brave, does not leave unscathed either. In the book, she is thrown by a curse that fractures her ankle. Ginny gave a howl of pain and was knocked off her feet. Her injury is not symbolic, it's literal. She cannot walk and Neville must help her. Yet in the film she casts Reducto with theatrical ease, a burst of CGI, untouched by the chaos around her. She is not hurt, she does not limp, she does not scream. The pain, the fear, the physical consequence, all are erased in favor of a glossy fight sequence that treats peril like a stage prop. Neville Longbottom, so often underestimated, shines in the novel's darkest hour. His nose is broken, his wand is snapped, but he does not retreat. He helps Hermione, he holds Ginny, he yells spells through blood and pain, refusing to abandon his friends. "We're not giving it to them," he shouts, voice thick with blood. His heroism is not glamorous, it is stubborn, ugly, and real. The movie gives us a cleaner version of Neville, noble and brave, but without the grit that defines his growth. His bloodied, swollen face is replaced by a clean shirt and determined stare. The environment itself is a character in the novel's battle. The rooms of the department twist with dread. Time turners shatter. Brains in jars spring to life, wrapping Neville in tentacles of thought. In one haunting moment, a Death Eater's head is caught in a time room hourglass, aging and de-aging in grotesque rhythm. His head was ballooning to the size of a pumpkin, shrinking to the size of a baby's, ballooning again. It is surreal, terrifying, and deeply magical. The movie chooses to simplify, flattening the battle into a wand-slinging laser show in one central chamber. The dreamlike horror of the department vanishes. The emotional stakes also fracture in translation. When Sirius finally appears roaring into battle with Kingsley and Remus at his side, the relief in the book is immense, but it is fleeting. The duel between Sirius and Bellatrix is not a duel, it's a knife fight, fast and final. There is no prolonged exchange of spells. 1 second he is laughing, deflecting curses with elegance. The next, he is struck. The second jet of light hit him squarely on the chest. He looks surprised for a moment, then falls through the veil. The quiet, sudden finality of it is unbearable. In the movie, Sirius is killed with operatic flair, his body arcing backward in slow motion. It's stylized death, stripped of the intimacy and horror that makes the moment land. Even Harry's reaction is diluted. In the book, he chases Bellatrix in blind rage, driven by loss. He casts Cruciatus and fails, realizing that righteous anger is not enough to wield dark magic. "You need to really mean it, Potter," Bellatrix taunts. It's a moment of growth and grief. The movie acknowledges this, but skips the emotional work that gives the scene its punch. There is no blood on Harry's hands, no shaking wand, no confrontation with the terrifying truth that he is not powerful enough to avenge Sirius. Dumbledore's arrival is a storm in the novel. He is not just powerful, he is elemental. The atrium becomes a battlefield of ancient forces. He transfigures statues, shields Harry, binds and banishes with surgical precision. The film captures the scale but misses the silence. In the book, Voldemort hurls curses meant to kill, but Dumbledore refuses to respond in kind. His magic is not about dominance but protection. He is trying to end the fight, not win it. This restraint is lost in the film's flashy duel, which becomes a battle of equals instead of a demonstration of Dumbledore's moral strength. After Voldemort possesses Harry, the boy feels himself slipping away. In the book, he is not saved by power, but by love. He remembers Sirius. He remembers the people he wants to live for. "You're the weak one," Harry tells Voldemort. "You'll never know love or friendship." The film echoes this, but without the internal struggle, without the sense that Harry is on the edge of annihilation. The possession becomes a visual trick rather than a spiritual trial. The book shows that what saves Harry is not strength, it is heart. The movie reduces this to a glowing montage. Perhaps the greatest loss in the adaptation is the core message of the Ministry battle, that war scars. These young people come out not as triumphant heroes, but as injured survivors. They are traumatized. They are lucky to be alive. In the hospital wing, they count wounds. Hermione may suffer permanent damage. Ron's brain was affected by spells. Neville lies bandaged and exhausted. The victory is hollow. In the film, this aftermath is largely absent. Everyone seems fine. There are no crutches, no gauze, no trembling hands. The darkness they faced leaves no mark. The book wants us to know that this was not a game. It was a massacre that could have gone worse. Luna and Neville are not comic sidekicks. They are warriors now. Ginny is not a little sister. She is a soldier with a limp. Ron and Hermione are not lovebirds. They are battered, broken, and bonded by blood. Harry is not a chosen one. He is a boy who watched a father figure die because he wasn't strong enough. These transformations matter. They are erased in the movie's final act, leaving the viewer with spectacle instead of sorrow. Rowling uses the Ministry battle to end childhood. These kids walk into it thinking they are brave. They walk out knowing they were foolish. They are not ready for war, but war found them anyway. The physical damage mirrors the emotional. The story forces us to look at how violence reshapes people. The film sidesteps this responsibility. It wants to entertain, not wound, but stories like this must wound to heal. They must remind us what it costs to stand for something. In omitting the injuries, the screams, the close calls, and the raw desperation, the film Order of the Phoenix misses its most important truth. The battle in the Ministry is not about choreography, it's about consequence. Every cut, every gasp, every collapse on the floor told the reader magic is not a toy and courage is not enough. The film erases those truths in favor of visual clarity, but it forgets that sometimes the most powerful images are the ones that leave bruises. Number 26. Harry tries to talk to Sirius's ghost. In the aftermath of Sirius Black's death, the pages of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix slow down, almost as if the world around Harry Potter itself struggles to accept what has just happened. Time bends under the weight of grief, and Rowling allows her young protagonist to feel it in full. Unlike the film adaptation, which speeds past the emotional wreckage with a few angry shouts and a broken mirror, the book lingers. In that lingering, Harry seeks a glimmer of impossible hope. Perhaps Sirius, like other witches and wizards before him, could return as a ghost. Harry's footsteps echo in the empty corridors of Hogwarts, not toward comfort, but toward understanding. His grief is no longer the explosive fury of a boy throwing things in Dumbledore's office. It has settled into something quieter but no less desperate. He walks not to scream or blame, but to ask. The one person who might hold the answer is nearly headless Nick, the resident ghost of Gryffindor Tower, a man suspended between the world of the living and the world beyond, the exact state Harry longs to understand. The scene is striking in its simplicity. Harry does not find solace. He finds truth, and the truth wounds deeper than any hex. Nick's response to Harry's trembling hope is measured and somber. He will not come back, the ghost tells him gently. Harry wants to know why. If other people return, why not Sirius? Why can't his godfather just be here, somewhere? The answer crushes the boy's heart. He will have gone on. In that moment, Nick ceases to be a comical character floating through corridors. He becomes a mirror to everything Harry does not want to hear. Nick reveals that becoming a ghost is not a given, but a choice, one driven by fear, regret, or unfinished business. Wizards can leave an imprint of themselves upon the earth, to walk palely where their living selves once trod, he explains, but this choice, he says, is made by the cowardly, by those afraid of what comes next. Sirius, with all his flaws, was never afraid to move forward, and so he has truly gone. This short passage in the book is among the most quietly devastating in the entire series. It introduces a permanent boundary, one that even magic cannot cross. The wizarding world, often painted in whimsical strokes and enchanted possibilities, here reminds the reader, and Harry, that some losses cannot be undone. No spell, no device, no secret door can bring back those who have passed on. The boy who lived, so often protected by miracles, must now learn what it means to live without one. What makes this absence in the film adaptation so significant is that it removes one of Harry's deepest confrontations with death. It reduces Sirius's death to an event, tragic, yes, but quickly buried beneath the noise of battle and prophecy. In the book, it is not only a turning point in plot, but a brutal transformation in Harry's emotional maturity. He stops being a boy looking for rescue and begins becoming a young man forced to carry grief without resolution. The physicality of grief is palpable in the novel's pages. Harry does not eat. He avoids people. He lies on his bed and stares at the ceiling. He did not cry, not even when Hermione's eyes filled with tears and she turned away from him. His detachment is not cinematic, it's personal. The world goes on, but Harry doesn't. His attempt to summon Sirius back as a ghost isn't just magical thinking. It's the logical conclusion of a boy raised in a world where anything is possible, discovering the one thing that is not. Even the symbolism in the book deepens through this scene. Nick, always dismissed because he failed to be fully beheaded, now stands as someone who also failed to move on and regrets it. I was afraid of death, he admits. The cowardice that made Nick cling to this world is suddenly not humorous but tragic. It turns the idea of a ghost from quirky to unsettling. It makes the absence of Sirius not a plot hole, but a heart hole. Without this scene, the film version of Order of the Phoenix misses a profound lesson, that some things are final, and even in a world of magic, finality has weight. The film lets Harry grieve with clenched fists, then marches him off into the next fight. The book, however, lets him grieve with questions. Real, painful questions. Questions like, why do some people come back and others don't? Why did Sirius leave when Harry needed him most? Couldn't he have stayed? There's an unmistakable honesty in Rowling's refusal to give Harry a comforting answer. Instead, she gives him the truth, that Sirius was not the kind of man to linger as a shadow. He lived recklessly with passion, with defiance, and in the end, he died the same way. "He would not come back," Nick says again, firmly. And in that moment, it becomes clear that Sirius's story has truly ended, not because he fell through a veil, but because he chose to walk beyond it. The presence of death has always loomed over the series, but it is in Order of the Phoenix that it becomes unignorable. This isn't the abstract grief of Harry's parents, long gone and mythologized. This is a man Harry loved in real time. A man who offered him a home, a family, and unconditional support. The last connection to his parents, gone in a flash and unreachable even by ghostly means. That conversation with Nick anchors Harry's mourning in reality. It strips away the magical trappings and asks readers to sit with loss, not solve it. And it elevates the story's emotional stakes in ways that a fast-paced movie can't replicate. Harry doesn't get closure. He gets understanding. And understanding sometimes is even harder than goodbye. Perhaps most poignantly, this moment shifts how Harry sees the world. He begins to recognize that the forces around him, love, death, choice, are not things he can master, even with a wand. He cannot summon Sirius, just as he could not save Cedric, or shield his parents, or rewrite prophecy. He learns through silence and sorrow that being a hero means carrying pain, not avoiding it. The absence of this scene in the film creates an emotional vacuum. Viewers are left with an action-packed finale, but not the soul-searching aftermath. Harry's journey toward accepting death, truly accepting it, is softened, rushed, and ultimately diminished. The film never allows space for the reader's most important lesson, that grief must be faced, not fixed. Sirius's voice, which once filled number 12 Grimmauld Place with fire and laughter, is never heard again, not even in whispers. And that is what makes the loss real. In omitting the scene with Nick, the film sacrifices a moment that gave Harry, and by extension all of us, a mirror into the soul of mourning. We do not get the comfort we crave, but we get the truth we need. The truth that ghosts are not answers. That sometimes, when the ones we love die, they do not come back, not even in magical worlds, because the point is not to call them back, but to remember them and to carry them forward in what we do next. Number 27, Harry destroys Dumbledore's office in grief. When Sirius Black fell through the veil in the Department of Mysteries, something inside Harry Potter broke irreparably. This wasn't like the other losses he had faced. Not Cedric, not his parents, not even the cold betrayal of people like Barty Crouch Jr. had felt this raw, this immediate, this cruel. It was the kind of grief that doesn't merely hurt. It consumes. And in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, this grief wasn't hidden behind stoicism or vague looks of sadness. It exploded. In Dumbledore's office, Harry finally unleashed the fury that had been simmering inside him for months. Rage, confusion, and anguish converged in a single volcanic moment. The reader watched as Harry smashed delicate instruments, knocked over tables, and screamed at the one man who always seemed to hold back the truth. It was not a heroic moment. It was not graceful. It was not magical. It was human. And yet in the film adaptation, this monumental scene was quietly erased, leaving behind only silence where there should have been storm. The book gave Harry the emotional space to break. When he returned to Hogwarts after the failed rescue mission, there was no comfort waiting for him. There was Dumbledore, the only one who might hold answers, sitting silently in his office. And as Harry entered, something snapped. "You don't care!" he shouted, hurling objects across the room. "You don't give a damn!" He was no longer the obedient student or the chosen. Boy, he was a 16-year-old, torn apart by guilt and sorrow. Dumbledore, for once, did not control the conversation. He stood quietly and allowed Harry to scream, to destroy, to fall apart. It was in this chaos that the real transformation began. Not the kind sparked by prophecy or spells, but the kind that marks the true arrival of adulthood. The film adaptation, for all its visual grandeur and high-stakes battles, chose to sidestep this scene entirely. Instead of allowing Harry's grief to breathe, it reduced his reaction to a few tearful glances and an emotionally muted return to Hogwarts. The impact of Sirius's death was brushed aside, and with it, one of the most crucial psychological shifts in Harry's character. The raw, unfiltered breakdown in Dumbledore's office wasn't just a moment of catharsis. It was the culmination of a year filled with neglect, manipulation, and emotional suppression. The Ministry had vilified him, his friends had doubted him, and even Dumbledore had ignored him. All of that came to a head in this room, and the film blinked. By skipping this moment, the movie sacrificed the emotional heartbeat of the story. It traded narrative depth for cinematic brevity. But those who read the book know this was the scene where Harry's voice, his real, unguarded voice, finally roared to life. He demanded truth. He broke the instruments that had always represented Dumbledore's mysterious omniscience. "Why didn't you tell me?" he screamed. "Why didn't you stop me?" The broken objects around him mirrored the shattering of trust. The boy who had once worshipped Dumbledore now saw him as a flawed, evasive figure. It was in these pieces, these shards of broken silver and glass, that Harry found a new clarity. And Dumbledore, for once, didn't offer platitudes. He gave him the truth. This was the first time Dumbledore admitted his own failure so plainly. He confessed to his fear, not of Voldemort, but of the love he felt for Harry. "I cared about you too much," he said in the book. And that line struck a chord so deep it echoed beyond the pages. The man who had always appeared so powerful, so invincible, finally revealed the cracks in his own armor. The broken office became a sanctuary of truth, of vulnerability, for both student and teacher. This wasn't a lesson in magic, it was a lesson in humanity, and it was earned through destruction, not restraint. In the book, Rowling let Harry be angry, and not just in the safe and teenage way. His rage was destructive, loud, uncomfortable. He was lashing out not just at Dumbledore, but at fate itself. He had played by the rules, he had followed the path, and still he had lost Sirius, the closest thing he had to family. His fists clenched not just with fury, but with helplessness. This wasn't the neat grief of cinema, softened by music and quiet tears. This was real. This was Harry throwing a golden instrument against a wall so hard that it cracked, watching it bleed silver mist, watching it die. It mirrored Sirius. Brilliant, sudden, gone. To remove that is to deny Harry his right to grieve. It is to tell the audience that silence is more appropriate than truth. And while film is a visual medium, it has the power to capture emotion just as vividly. But it chose not to. It showed Harry sad but not shattered. It showed him grieving but not broken. And that is not who Harry was at that moment. He was a boy undone. And through that undoing, he began to rebuild.